I was on the negotiating committee 3 times in the Tulsa Philharmonic. Thereafter, I went to the Nashville Symphony, and in all of those circumstances, I found that even though, for example, in Tulsa we had an attorney on our negotiating committee, as far as how we solve difficult core orchestra problems and also things like divisiveness between core and per service people, um, we weren't getting anywhere. It was, the orchestra was divided, management was taking advantage of that and actually fostering that division to their advantage. When it came to how we add players to the core, we didn't know how to do that. When it came to issues of daytime and nighttime rehearsals, it was extremely difficult to figure that out. That was more an issue with the Nashville Symphony. But the sum total was, while we would call the AF of M, I'm going back to the 70s, they were not skilled in the issues that were facing the regional orchestras at that time period. And we would call ICSOM. And ICSOM at that time also did not have answers for us. And so it became apparent that we needed our own organization so that we could communicate with each other. After I had originally sent out the letter back in 1982 proposing this idea, people came excited about that. We had some correspondence back and forth and about the possibilities of having a summer conference and having, someday a strike fund, or but particularly that we had a vehicle to communicate with each other. And through our initial outreach to each other, we had set up kind of informal communication network, and right away we saw the benefits of connecting with each other, learning from each other, and talking to each other on the phone. We didn't, of course, have email in those days. So when Lou's letter was sent out to the locals and the committees from all the regional orchestras that were contacted, they responded enthusiastically because they wanted to learn. It was a time when all of our orchestras were going through phenomenal change. And when people got to ROPA, we had some of the best teachers we could have had. Lou, Fred Zanone, Victor Fuentealba. Fred Zanone was then chair of ICSOM. And it was an absolute electrifying experience. And it just built upon the enthusiasm that was already there. There was one day in about, I think, 1983 sometime, where I got a voicemail from a man with a most wonderful voice who said, "My name is Lou Waldeck, and I'm with the AF of M, and I heard that you are doing things to try to start a regional orchestra players association, and I'd like to help." And so it was like almost the voice from God had called. And so I called Lou back right away and told him what our issues were at that time I was in the Nashville Symphony, and what I had experienced in Tulsa, and that we were trying to get a organization started similar to ICSOM that was solely for the needs of regional orchestras. And he got very excited about that, and particularly that the orchestras were trying to, had a thirst to learn, had a thirst to want to do things the right way. And so Lou communicated with me off and on from '83 onward, and then he called me one day in '84 that they were going to have what he termed a seminar in September of 1984 for what he hoped would be the beginning of the Regional Orchestra Players Association. And that is what happened in Columbus in 1984. And throughout that process, Lou was totally supportive. He went and campaigned to the International Executive Board and to AFM President Victor Fuentialba, who were all very supportive of it. And ROPA was created. Thereafter, through our efforts as the first ROPA board and through AFM Symphony Department at that time, the name Lou Waldeck became known, and we started bringing in Lou to do our negotiations. Lou began to do his famous dog and pony shows for all our orchestras, and we just absolutely soaked up the knowledge like sponges. It was just incredible. And all of a sudden, through Lou, we were coming to the table far more educated and sophisticated than our management, and our managements did not know what to do. So ROPA would not be here if it was not for Lou Waldeck. And I was extremely fortunate not only to have learned from him, and he hired me to work in SSD back in 1988, but to this day, his mentoring governs so much of everything that I do in all my work.
Now, neither kind of persuasion is effective by itself. If you only use force, management has no choice. If you're going to try to bully them, they have no choice but to take your strength. There's no way that they can back down. You simply go in, totally adamant, either you give us this or we're going to strike. They can't let you do that. They can't let you do that because they are in a very funny position with their board and with the public and with the politicians and the people who fund this thing and everything else. So they can't do that. If you use only reason, they'll let you talk and talk and talk, and on the night of the first rehearsal, they'll sign. Whatever it is, you will have no option. They will know that. Collective bargaining works best when both parties are strong and knowledgeable. A large part of this process has to do with equalizing the strength, with developing at least as much knowledge and preparation as the management will bring to the table, and in many cases, orchestras come to the table much more prepared than their managers. They have done homework that matches the management by some time. It's very valuable to do that. At the table, you do not use unnecessary sarcasm. Sarcasm is very painful. It gets them upset, it gets them defensive, it gets them angry. And why do you need that? It's not a good tool. Don't insult people. We're dealing with people. These people on the other side of the table are human beings. No matter, even if they're managers. They are human beings. They are working very hard, and in most cases, they are doing their job. Don't insult them. Don't question their integrity. Don't constantly impute the worst of motives. Don't forget that the management team is made up of people. Don't irritate people needlessly. The act of thing is needlessly. You have to say the hard truths. They have to hear them. But don't do it gratuitously. In a negotiation, there are a number of qualities that it is useful for negotiating committee members to have. Avoid anger. Do not ever speak when you are angry. That's when you say dumb things. If you become angry, let somebody else speak. If you're all angry, call a caucus. What you want to do with that anger is get control of it and let that anger, after you have cooled off, drive your sense of passion and commitment. Don't talk out of anger. That's when you make mistakes. It's when you do the really dumb things. You have to balance aggressiveness with reasonableness. You don't want people to think that you are so reasonable that they can eventually talk you into anything. On the other hand, you don't want them to think that you are so aggressive as to leave this process a total waste of time. So there needs to be a balance. Sometimes it can be a balance between two people, good cop, bad cop.
I was a member of the Columbus Symphony, chairman of the negotiating committee, and got a call one night from Nathan Kahn, somewhere around 1983, 1984. And Nathan had been talking with a lot of committee chairs from around the country. And we realized that we were all moving in the same direction, trying to bargain contracts, increase wages, dealing with issues that were unique in a core orchestra, issues between per-service musicians and full-time players. And we all came to the same conclusion that we needed a forum to network and talk to each other about the issues we were facing and attempt to resolve them together and share ideas that worked. Oh, I think not only did it meet all of our expectations, it was certainly a pleasant surprise. And as we sit here 35 years later, we know that it was a gigantic success.
Did the interest generated by this initiative meet your expectations?
Oh yes, not only did it meet our expectations, it surpassed our wildest imagination. I mean, you can look at it today, 30 years later, and it's still here and it's still doing the things that we wanted it to do and hoped it would do 30 years ago.
What benefits did you foresee as a reason for an orchestra to belong to ROPA?
I think what we were all looking for is the forum to talk to each other about our problems, to discover ways that other orchestras were solving some of the issues we were facing at home. And it was a pleasant surprise to be able to talk with people who understood what we were dealing with, because we were all dealing with those issues. So we found a way to share information, and together we found solutions.
How do the topics of the very first meeting relate to today's issues in regional orchestras?
Very much the same. As much as things change, they stay the same. And I look at the issues facing all orchestras today, and it's amazing because in 1984, most of the major orchestras who had strikes and witnessed and participated in endured strikes and gains felt they were in a comfortable place. I think they believed when we would talk with some orchestras about how they resolved issues or the kinds of issues we were having, we would get the remarks that, oh, that would never happen to us. Management would never do that to us again. We've passed that. And unfortunately, we're starting to see that in the past few years where a lot of those issues have come back. I think what we were all looking for is the forum to talk to each other about our problems, to discover ways that other orchestras were solving some of the issues we were facing at home. And it was a pleasant surprise to be able to talk with people who understood what we were dealing with, because we were all dealing with those issues. So we found a way to share information, and together we found solutions. Very much the same. As much as things change, they stay the same. And I look at the issues facing all orchestras today, and it's amazing because in 1984, most of the major orchestras who had strikes and witnessed and participated in endured strikes and gains felt they were in a comfortable place. I think they believed when we would talk with ICSOM orchestras about how they resolved issues or the kinds of issues we were having, we would get the remarks that, oh, that would never happen to us. Management would never do that to us again. We've passed that. And unfortunately, we're starting to see that in the past few years where a lot of those issues have come back.
When I took office, I could see that all these things needed to be done to improve the way ROPA was viewed within our own AFM community and the orchestra community at large and just around the country, basically. So I thought, well, we need to work a lot more on networking and getting our message across as an individual entity rather than standing in the shadow of our fellow player conferences. So we worked really hard on that, and we worked on networking between our constituencies and our groups, like between the delegates and the local officers. There needed to be a lot of improvement in communication and just general things like that. I was really lucky to have a fantastic executive board the whole time I was president, and all the delegates were terrific. We started doing all kinds of different things, like strategic planning sessions with the executive board. We had our first midwinter ROPA meeting during my tenure, and we also started the member large breakouts, which I think were fantastic, because what we were doing was having, before that, we were having everybody give their orchestra reports during the plenary sessions, and that got to be a little silly because they only were able to talk for a minute or two when they would get a cowbell or something to tell them to stop. So it was good to have a separate breakout to get everybody talking about their issues a little bit more in detail. ROPA helps musicians in all kinds of ways. I think the basic premise for ROPA is giving the delegates a chance to talk to us on the board and to the other delegates and to the staff, and to just start to get different ideas about where they should go with their questions, and to just feel like they're being listened to, that somebody really cares and understands what they're talking about, because a lot of times, even within your own orchestra, people aren't really getting it, don't get what the problems are. So ROPA gives you a chance to talk about all that kind of stuff. We also did a lot of on-site visits, starting with my tenure, and the one I remember the most was Pittsburgh Ballet. We went because they were being threatened with replacement by cassette tape, basically, for the whole season. So a bunch of us went to Pittsburgh during their annual board picnic. We just descended upon them in these bright green t-shirts with little cassette tapes on it, with a little stripe through it saying, "Don't replace us with cassette tapes." And boy, all those board members were really surprised to see these swarms of people coming at them, defending the musicians. And we talked to all the patrons and donors and everybody, and that actually worked out pretty well for us that year. The annual conference is a great thing. It was my favorite thing about being ROPA president, because it was a kind of reward for everything we did all year long. You finally get to meet all those people that you emailed with and talked on the phone with. It was kind of a culmination of everything we did during the year and a new beginning for the next season. I really enjoyed getting to know everybody and seeing all the excitement. We always had a lot of fun, but we always learned a lot. Even coming back now as President Emerita, I attend all the sessions, and I'm always amazed at how much new information I get and how energized all the delegates are. It's fantastic. It's really important to keep developing new officers and to identify potential leaders, which is one thing we can do at the conference. I've really been very proud of that, and we've always had great officers all along. I'm also really proud of the way we have connected with the labor movement in general a little bit more. It's very important to be connected with labor notes and jobs with justice and your central labor councils, things we've talked about at the conferences, and to nurture that to be there for them when they need us, and then they'll be there for us when we need them is a great thing. The most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life was to be ROPA president. I don't think there's ever going to be anything that equals it. I'm so honored that I was able to serve as president, and I'm happy to come back every year to the conference and see how everything is improving and developing, and everybody's so excited about things and getting new ideas. I'm very happy to still be involved.
My eyes were open to ROPA when we were negotiating in Binghamton, the two orchestras there. Janice Galassi mentioned ROPA, and I will confess, no idea about it at the time. She said, "You've got to join ROPA, you've got to look into it." And now that our orchestra's voted to join, I'm a delegate, my expectations exceed what I had hoped for. I would say that I've been able to get in touch with other musicians in orchestras across the country with contract issues and get immediate responses, whether by email on the list or individually. It supplements the support that I've gotten through Symphonic Services. Jay Blumenthal and his staff are wonderful, but they have a lot of work to do, and so another thing that I'm struck by with ROPA is if I have a contract issue and I want to know, sure, I can go to the Symphonic Services database and take a look at a contract language, but I want to know, how did that work out for you? What happened when this situation arose? And I can do that with the delegates in ROPA. Well, we were negotiating a few years ago, and we had at the help of Janice Galassi through Symphonic Services, and she mentioned what ROPA was all about, and it just made so much sense to tap into that network, to be able to have conversations with other musicians, and to use the resources that are available to us to negotiate. It's evident that there are going to be challenges ahead, and that we need every tool that we can possibly use for those challenges. Definitely. It's given me a lot of confidence, because when I have an assertion, well, I think this seems reasonable, I can go back to other delegates and pose a question on the list and say, with this contract issue, what are you finding? What issues are you, or how are you dealing with this contract issue? And I can get immediate responses. And so it also, there's just this support network of people doing the same kind of work, facing the same kinds of issues. And that's really powerful. Yeah, I just wanted to share that one of my other careers is that of an academic librarian. And I loved that career. I was at Cornell for a while in the School of Industrial and Labor Relations. And I've been to many conferences, and the ROPA conference, this is my first, and actually I haven't even started the full-fledged conference yet, just had our negotiating workshop. It's inspiring to me. I've been excited. I actually wanted to go to the conference last year, but we hadn't quite gotten it together for me to come, or for anyone else to come. It's a unique kind of environment. I want to be here. This is all really practical stuff that we're learning, and it's all very relevant. And the people make the organization. The camaraderie and the fact that we were all trained, we went to college and studied our instruments and our craft, and now we're advocating for other musicians. I feel a privilege to be a part of that, and I hope to be able to come for many years.
I think the original bylaws that we put together, the 5 or 6 of us that were officers back then, combined with the things we had learned in 1984, we wanted ROPA to be a communication organization for the orchestras. We wanted it to be a tool for education. We wanted it to be a support network for the orchestras for whatever our members needed. Somewhat modeled after ICSOM, but in particular with the focus on the unique problems we had. What I see right now is that what was set forth in those original bylaws, those basic fundamentals are still very much at play today. We find new orchestras who join ROPA who maybe haven't had as much exposure or experience in how to deal with not only their contract negotiations, their contract administration issues, but just their day-to-day operations. That has provided them a means to become much more educated, to avail themselves of resources provided from the AFM, whatever they may be, and therefore, I think, has moved not only the players but their very institutions forward. Many ROPA orchestras have grown significantly. Some have moved on to ICSOM. But those fundamental principles of education, communication, and support were our basis in 1984 and still going strong.